Casey Price was 43 years old and worked airport maintenance at Nashville International. Most people who passed him in the terminal saw the same thing: a quiet, divorced man in a faded Navy uniform, carrying a dented lunchbox and driving an old Ford pickup with rust around the wheel wells. What they didn't know was that Casey had spent the last 2 years paying tens of thousands of dollars for his ex-wife's mother's cancer treatments. Then at gate B12, with cold air hissing from an open maintenance panel behind him, Casey watched Diane Holloway step out of first-class boarding line, wearing gold jewelry, perfect makeup, and a tan that no dying woman should have had. And then he heard her laugh. He still thinks I'm sick. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. And if you enjoy slow burn stories about betrayal, quiet revenge, and hidden truths, make sure you subscribe. Tomorrow's story gets even colder. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning in late October. Nashville had just started turning cold. The maple tree outside Casey Price's small brick house in Antioch dropped orange leaves across the driveway while he stood at the mailbox holding a white envelope from Holloway and Pierce Family Law. No shouting had led to that envelope. No broken plates. No dramatic affair exposed in a restaurant parking lot. The marriage had simply gone quiet first. Vanessa Price used to talk constantly when they first met. Fast words, fast plans. She loved rooftop bars, downtown crowded brunch places near the Gulch, and real estate open houses she couldn't afford, but liked pretending she belonged in. Casey used to listen while tightening bolts under restaurant freezers during overnight repair jobs. She talked enough for both of them. Back then, she said his silence felt safe. 10 years later, she called the same silence dead weight. Casey never answered that insult. He only stood in the kitchen holding a coffee mug while Vanessa paced near the marble island she insisted on financing 3 years earlier. "You're 41 years old," she told him that winter night. "You still smell like machine oil when you come home." He looked down at his hands. The black grease lines near his fingernails never fully disappeared anymore, no matter how hard he scrubbed after work. "I work maintenance," he said quietly. "You hide in maintenance," she replied. The sentence stayed with him longer than the divorce itself. Vanessa had changed slowly over the years. At first it was harmless things. Designer handbags bought on payment plans. Luxury apartments bookmarked online. Weekend trips charged to credit cards they couldn't pay off quickly enough. Then came the influencer friends, realtors, cosmetic dentists, women who spoke about energy and high-value lifestyles while drinking $80 champagne downtown. Casey never fit into those rooms. At parties, he usually stood near the back, holding a sweating glass of bourbon, while Vanessa laughed too loudly beside men in tailored jackets who worked in commercial development or finance. She introduced Casey the same way every time. "This is my husband. He works at the airport. Not engineer, not systems technician, not refrigeration specialist, just airport." Like he pushed wheelchairs between terminals. Casey never corrected her. He spent most nights inside mechanical rooms anyway. Loud compressor units, steel pipes dripping condensation, the sharp smell of coolant in the air. His world was concrete floors and fluorescent lights. He understood machines better than conversations. Then Diane Holloway got sick. The phone call came just after midnight, while Casey was replacing a failed evaporator motor inside Concourse C. Vanessa's voice broke apart through the speaker. "It's Mom." Casey drove straight from the airport to Vanderbilt University Medical Center without changing clothes. Grease stains still covered his sleeves when he walked into the oncology wing at 3 in the morning carrying vending machine coffee. Diane looked small in the hospital bed, smaller than he remembered. For the first time in years, Vanessa stopped talking about money. The diagnosis changed everything around the house after that. Chemotherapy schedules replaced dinner plans. Insurance calls replaced arguments about vacations. Vanessa cried often during those first months. Casey quietly handled whatever she forgot. Prescriptions, pharmacy pickups, insurance forms, repairs around Diane's condo. And Diane noticed. Unlike Vanessa, Diane never looked embarrassed by Casey's work clothes. One freezing December evening, Casey spent 4 hours repairing the old furnace inside Diane's townhouse in Franklin after a snowstorm damaged the ignition control board. He refused payment. Diane watched him pack his tools near midnight. "You're the only dependable man my daughter ever had," she told him softly. Casey remembered those words later, especially after the divorce, because when Vanessa finally asked for separation 8 months later, Diane's illness sat at the center of the conversation like another person in the room. Vanessa chose a restaurant near Green Hills for the discussion. Quiet place, low lights, expensive steaks Casey barely touched. "I can't do this marriage anymore," Vanessa said while staring at the wine list instead of him. Casey nodded once. No scene, no begging, no negotiation. That almost irritated her more. "You're not even going to ask why. I already know why." Vanessa leaned back in the booth. "You've given up on yourself, Casey." He looked through the restaurant window toward the parking lot rain. Outside, a valet jogged between luxury SUVs under yellow streetlights. Inside, Vanessa continued speaking carefully, like she had rehearsed everything. "I want more out of life than barely surviving every month." Casey thought about the 70-hour weeks he had worked while she built an online image of success they couldn't afford. But he said nothing. Then her tone shifted. "My mom's treatments are getting worse," she said quietly. "The insurance isn't covering everything." There it was, not love, not regret, money. Vanessa slid paperwork across the table. The divorce itself looked standard enough. House sale, retirement split, separate debt assignments. Then Casey reached the medical support clause. He read the paragraph twice. Temporary, voluntary assistance for ongoing oncology-related expenses concerning Diane Holloway. Vanessa folded her hands. She may not survive another 2 years. Casey kept reading silently. His attorney, a tired man named Richard Boone, had already warned him privately earlier that afternoon. "You are under no obligation to continue paying anything after dissolution," Boone had said. "This clause is unusual." But Casey remembered Diane sitting alone in that hospital room, while snow hit the windows outside Vanderbilt. He remembered her handing him a plate of food when he lost his father years earlier. He remembered her calling him dependable. That mattered to him, maybe more than it should have. So Casey picked up the pen. Vanessa looked genuinely surprised when he signed. "You're agreeing to this?" "She's sick." "That's still my mother," Vanessa said carefully. Casey met her eyes for the first time that night. "I know." The house sold 3 months later. Vanessa moved into a luxury apartment near downtown Nashville. Casey rented a smaller brick place 20 minutes from the airport, beside a tire shop and a liquor store. The first medical invoice arrived 6 days after Christmas. The envelope carried the logo, Vanderbilt Oncology Financial Services. Inside was a balance statement for $6,842.17. Chemotherapy, support medications, specialist consultations, extended infusion treatment. Casey sat alone at his kitchen table, under weak overhead lighting, while the old refrigerator hummed beside him. Outside rain tapped softly against the windows. He stared at the number for a long time before opening his banking app. Then he paid it. Without a word, the payments became part of Casey Price's life the same way sunrise became part of morning shifts at the airport. Quiet, predictable, heavy. On the 5th day of every month, an invoice appeared in his mailbox or email inbox, sometimes both. Vanderbilt Oncology, Financial Services, different balances, different treatment descriptions, same urgency. Casey always paid within 24 hours. At first, the amount stayed manageable. $4,000, $6,000, occasionally $8,000. Then the numbers began climbing. Specialist imaging, extended immunotherapy, experimental medication approvals. Each invoice carried enough medical language to feel legitimate, enough detail to discourage questions. Casey never questioned them anyway. He simply worked more. By the 2nd year after the divorce, Casey's schedule looked less like employment and more like endurance. He covered overnight emergency calls across Nashville International Airport and sometimes nearby commercial refrigeration contracts on weekends, restaurant freezers, hotel cooling systems, grocery storage units. If something broke and leaked cold air at 2 in the morning, Casey usually got the call. His body started aging faster during those months. The cartilage pain in his knees worsened from kneeling on concrete floors. Deep blue shadows settled permanently beneath his eyes. His hands stayed cracked from chemical cleaners and winter air leaking through old loading dock doors. But his routine never changed. Wake up, black coffee, work, transfer money, sleep, repeat. His rented brick house in Antioch barely looked lived in anymore. The living room still held unpacked cardboard boxes from the divorce 2 years earlier. Casey never bothered decorating. The television stayed unplugged most weeks. Most nights, he fell asleep in his recliner wearing thermal work clothes, while ESPN reruns played silently on the screen. The only thing he consistently organized was the folder beside the kitchen counter. Invoices, transfer confirmations, receipts, every single one dated and filed carefully. Not because he expected trouble, because Casey organized everything that way. At work, Marcus Bennett started noticing changes long before anyone else did. Marcus had worked airport maintenance nearly 15 years himself. Bigger man, bald head, loud laugh that echoed through maintenance tunnels under the terminals. He understood exhaustion when he saw it. 1. Freezing January night, Marcus found Casey inside mechanical room C-14, replacing a compressor relay at nearly 1 in the morning. "You're covering another double?" Marcus asked. Casey tightened a bolt without looking up. Somebody called out. Marcus snorted. "No. Somebody always calls you because you never say no." Casey wiped grease from his knuckles with a rag. The room vibrated with the low growl of industrial cooling units around them. Marcus leaned against the steel door. "You still paying those hospital bills?" Casey paused only briefly. "Yeah." "For your ex-mother-in-law?" "Yeah." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. "That woman even call you anymore?" Casey slid the panel back into place. "Not much." "Vanessa?" "No." Marcus let out a slow breath through his nose. "That's crazy, man." Casey finally stood. "What is?" "You financing somebody else's life after your marriage already died." Casey locked his toolbox. "She's sick." "You even seen her recently?" "No." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That should bother you more than it does." But Casey only picked up his flashlight and started walking toward the next maintenance call. That conversation stayed with Marcus, not Casey. Casey had trained himself not to dwell on things he couldn't directly fix. Machines made sense. People usually didn't. Vanessa still contacted him occasionally, though never for long conversations. Mostly short texts arriving late at night. "Mom had a rough treatment today." "Thank you for helping." "Doctor says next few months are critical." Insurance denied another medication. Sometimes she attached blurry photos. Diane sitting in hospital chairs, blankets, IV lines, dim lighting. The pictures always looked cropped too tightly, grainy, like they had been forwarded multiple times. Casey never analyzed them carefully. He only looked long enough to convince himself Diane was still alive. Then he sent the money. Spring came and went. Then another summer. Meanwhile, Vanessa's social media slowly changed. Not openly extravagant. She was smarter than that. But Casey noticed details accidentally whenever mutual friends tagged public photos online. Cocktail glasses on rooftop patios downtown. Weekend trips near Destin. Designer sunglasses. Smiling groups on charter boats. Vanessa herself rarely posted directly anymore. Mostly reposts from friends. Casey ignored most of it, except once. Late one night after a 14-hour shift, repairing a failed cooling unit near baggage claim, Casey sat at his kitchen table, eating microwaved soup from a paper bowl when Marcus sent him a screenshot. Vanessa at a luxury steakhouse in Miami, date stamped 3 days earlier. Casey stared at the image quietly. White dress, gold necklace, ocean view behind her. No sign of Diane. Marcus immediately texted underneath, "You sure you ain't getting played?" Casey locked his phone without answering. But he didn't sleep much that night. The next invoice arrived 4 days later. $11,208.54. Experimental infusion support. Casey transferred the payment before leaving for work. Still, small things started bothering him after that. Not enough to stop. Just enough to notice. The invoices sometimes used slightly different fonts in the headers. One bill listed Vanderbilt Medical Center. Another listed Vanderbilt Oncology Financial Services. One envelope arrived from Nashville, another from a processing center in Atlanta. Casey assumed hospitals outsourced billing. He didn't know enough about medical systems to question it. And honestly, part of him didn't want to question it. Because if the bills were fake, then the last 2 years of sacrifice meant something uglier than loss. It meant humiliation. Casey preferred exhaustion over humiliation. One humid August afternoon, he stopped by a gas station outside Murfreesboro between repair calls. While pumping gas into the old Ford, he checked his banking balance. 3 digits left until payday. He stood there beneath flickering fluorescent lights while trucks rolled past the interstate. 43 years old, working 70-hour weeks, eating gas station sandwiches, paying medical bills for a woman he no longer saw. And somehow, Casey still didn't feel angry, only tired. That night, he returned home after midnight and found another message from Vanessa. Waiting. Mom's numbers dropped again today. Doctors are trying something new. Thank you for not abandoning her. Casey stared at the screen for a long time. Then he typed only one reply. How is she feeling? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, some days better than others. No photo this time. No details. Just silence afterward. Casey placed the phone face down on the kitchen table and rubbed both hands across his face. The refrigerator hummed softly nearby. Rain tapped against the windows. For the first time in 2 years, something cold moved through the back of his mind. Not suspicion exactly, just a feeling that pieces no longer fit together correctly. The next morning at work, Marcus found Casey sitting alone inside the maintenance break room, staring at another invoice. Marcus grabbed coffee from the vending machine. How bad? Casey handed him the paper. Marcus whistled low. 18 grand. Experimental treatment authorization and advanced oncology support services. Marcus looked up slowly. Man, this doesn't even sound real anymore. Casey took the invoice back. At the bottom sat another transfer deadline, 48 hours. Marcus watched him carefully. You ever think maybe you should ask more questions? Casey folded the paper once, then again. Finally, he slid it carefully into the worn leather folder beside him. I gave my word, he said quietly. Marcus leaned back in the chair. Yeah, he muttered. But you gave it to people who stopped treating you like a human being a long time ago. Casey said nothing. But later that afternoon, while tightening bolts inside a freezing service corridor beneath Concourse B, he made a mistake for the first time in months. His wrench slipped. The steel edge split the skin across his knuckles. Blood hit the concrete floor instantly. Casey stared at it longer than necessary. Then he wrapped the wound in electrical tape and kept working. The morning Casey Price saw Diane Holloway at Gate B12 began like every other maintenance shift at Nashville International Airport. Dark outside, cold concrete floors, coffee burned too long on a heating plate inside the maintenance office. Casey arrived at 4:37 a.m., wearing the same faded navy work jacket he had owned for almost 6 years. The left sleeve still carried a small bleach stain from a refrigerant leak cleanup near Terminal C the previous winter. His steel thermos sat beside a folded work order packet while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The airport never truly slept. Even before sunrise, baggage carts rattled across service roads behind the terminals. Cleaning crews pushed gray bins through silent concourses. Early passengers drifted toward TSA checkpoints, carrying neck pillows and oversized coffees. Casey preferred those hours. Machines were calmer before crowds arrived. At 5:12 a.m., dispatch radioed a service call from Concourse B. Maintenance to Gate B12. Cooling airflow issue reported near south seating section. Casey acknowledged quietly and grabbed his tool case. The service corridor behind Concourse B smelled faintly of jet fuel and industrial cleaner. Casey walked past electrical panels and humming ventilation systems before pushing through the metal access door near the gate seating area. Cold air immediately brushed against his face. One of the overhead airflow units had partially failed, leaking uneven streams of chilled air into the waiting area. Passengers nearby complained while airport staff tried redirecting people farther down the terminal. Casey knelt beneath the vent housing and removed the lower service panel. Metal screws clinked softly against the tile floor. Above him, the airport announcement system echoed through the concourse. Southwest Airlines Flight 2187 to Miami, now boarding Group A, Miami. Casey barely noticed the destination at first. He focused on the damaged actuator motor inside the cooling assembly. One bearing had worn nearly smooth. The vibration explained the airflow issue immediately. Simple repair. His hands moved automatically. Flashlight between his teeth. Socket wrench turning bolts loose. Cold air hissing softly above him. Then he heard a laugh. Not loud, sharp. Familiar enough to freeze his hands in place. Casey slowly lowered the wrench. Footsteps passed nearby across the polished floor tiles. He turned slightly without fully standing. Vanessa. For a moment, his brain refused to place her there correctly. The image didn't fit reality. She looked different from the woman who used to sit across from him at kitchen tables, surrounded by overdue bills. More polished now, more expensive. Camel-colored wool coat, cream turtleneck sweater, leather boots that probably cost more than Casey spent on groceries in a month. Her dark hair fell perfectly straight over one shoulder, while she rolled a white designer suitcase toward the boarding lane. But it wasn't Vanessa that stopped Casey's breathing. It was the woman walking beside her, Diane Holloway, healthy, not hospital healthy, not recovering healthy, vacation healthy. Her skin carried a warm tan that no chemotherapy patient should have in December. Her silver hair looked freshly styled. Gold bracelets moved softly against her wrist as she adjusted a leather handbag Casey immediately recognized as designer. No scarf covering hair loss, no weakness, no oxygen support, no careful movement. She walked normally, actually better than normal. Casey stayed crouched behind the half-open maintenance panel while passengers moved around him. His pulse began pounding heavily in his ears. Diane smiled at something Vanessa said. Then Casey saw it. First-class boarding tags attached to both suitcases. The cold air from the damaged vent suddenly felt sharper against his skin. For 2 years, Casey had eaten microwaved dinners and worked overnight repair shifts to pay hospital invoices. And Diane Holloway looked like she had just stepped out of a luxury travel magazine. Vanessa stopped near the boarding lane scanner. "Did you bring the reservation confirmation?" she asked. Diane patted her purse. "In the front pocket." Vanessa laughed quietly. "You almost forgot it again in Scottsdale." Scottsdale, Arizona. Casey stared motionless at the floor. Another trip, another place, another life he apparently financed without knowing. Passengers continued boarding around them, while Casey remained partially hidden beside the vent housing. Then Diane leaned closer toward Vanessa. "You booked the Ocean View suite, right? Obviously, I still can't believe he paid for all this." Vanessa smirked slightly. "He thinks you're getting treatment." The sentence landed harder than Casey expected. Not because of the betrayal, because of how casually she said it. Like discussing weather. Diane shook her head with a soft laugh. Casey was always too soft to question anything. Neither woman sounded nervous. Neither sounded guilty. Just amused. Casey's fingers tightened slowly around the wrench handle until the edges bit into his palm. A younger version of him might have stood immediately, might have shouted across the gate area, might have demanded answers in front of strangers and airline staff and security cameras. But 43-year-old Casey Price had spent 2 years swallowing exhaustion quietly. That kind of man learned control before anger. So he stayed still. His breathing slowed deliberately. The maintenance panel shielded most of his body from view, while travelers crowded between them. Casey carefully reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. No sudden movements, no emotion on his face. He activated the camera. First. One photo, then another. Vanessa beside the boarding lane. Diane holding her passport. The first-class tags clearly visible. Casey zoomed slightly closer. Miami flight information. Timestamp. Gate number. Everything clear. Then he switched silently to video. Their voices became harder to hear beneath airport announcements and rolling luggage wheels, but enough carried through. Final transfer cleared yesterday. The condo payment. He never checks anything. Casey recorded 37 seconds before a TSA employee walked between them. His hands remained steady. That surprised even him. Above the concourse windows, weak winter sunlight finally began spreading across the tarmac outside. Aircraft lights blinked through the early morning fog while baggage crews loaded suitcases beneath the wings. Casey remembered every extra shift, every missed holiday, every invoice paid instead of replacing his failing transmission. And Diane Holloway had spent that money boarding first class to Miami. Vanessa glanced toward the seating area suddenly. For one dangerous second, Casey thought she had seen him. But her attention shifted immediately toward the boarding scanner instead. Group A passengers now welcome aboard. The airline attendant smiled. Vanessa handed over both boarding passes. Diane adjusted her gold bracelet. Then she laughed one more time. He really believed I was dying. Casey felt something inside him settle cold and hard at the center of his chest. Not rage. Worse, clarity. The boarding line moved forward. Casey lowered the phone carefully. His reflection stared faintly back from the dark screen. Tired eyes, grease stain near his collar, small cut across his knuckles, still wrapped in electrical tape from yesterday's shift. 2 years. Gone. Bought vacations, luxury condos, designer luggage. The actuator motor above him continued rattling inside the cooling vent. Casey slowly placed the wrench back into his toolbox. Then, without taking his eyes off the boarding gate, he reached for his phone again. This time, he opened his contacts. Marcus Bennett. The call connected after 2 rings. Marcus sounded half asleep. "You know what time it is, Casey." Kept watching Vanessa disappear down the jet bridge beside Diane. His voice stayed calm. Too calm. "I need you to tell me something," he said quietly. What Casey looked down at the stack of medical invoices, still folded inside his work jacket pocket. "What's the first thing you do when you realize somebody's been lying to you for 2 straight years?" Marcus went silent. And for the first time since the divorce, Casey Price stopped feeling tired. Marcus Bennett arrived at Casey's house 23 minutes after the phone call. The old Ford pickup was already parked crooked in the driveway when Marcus pulled up beside it in his dark blue Tacoma. Rain had started falling lightly across Antioch, by then thin streaks sliding under the yellow glow of the street lamp near the corner liquor store. Casey opened the front door before Marcus even knocked. "You look like hell," Marcus said immediately. Casey stepped aside silently. The house smelled faintly like black coffee and motor oil. A single kitchen light illuminated the room while the rest of the place stayed dark. The leather folder containing 2 years of invoices sat open across the kitchen table beside Casey's phone charger and a half-empty bottle of ibuprofen. Marcus removed his jacket slowly. "You gonna tell me what happened now?" Casey handed him the phone without a word. Marcus watched the airport video once, then again. The second time, he lowered the volume and focused entirely on Dan and Vanessa's faces. When the video ended, the kitchen stayed silent, except for rain tapping against the windows. Finally, Marcus exhaled hard through his nose. "Oh, man." Casey leaned against the counter with both arms crossed. No yelling, no pacing, no rage. That disturbed Marcus more than anger would have. "You sure that's recent?" Marcus asked, carefully. "I recorded it this morning." Marcus rubbed his jaw. "And she looked healthy like that the whole time." Casey nodded once. Marcus replayed the clip again until Diane's voice filled the kitchen. "He really believed I was dying." Marcus locked the phone screen slowly. "That's evil." Casey looked toward the invoices spread across the table. For a long moment he said nothing at all. Then quietly, "I almost walked over there." "What stopped you?" Casey thought about that question seriously before answering. Didn't seem useful. Marcus stared at him. Most people would have caused a scene. Most scenes don't fix anything. The rain outside grew heavier. Casey sat down at the table and pulled the leather folder closer. Inside were dozens of invoices, organized chronologically, with transfer receipts clipped behind them, 2 full years reduced to paperwork. Marcus flipped through the stack. Jesus Christ. Every page carried the same hospital branding. Official-looking logos. Detailed billing codes. Medical terminology, dense enough to overwhelm anyone unfamiliar with oncology. At first glance, everything appeared legitimate. But now, Casey saw things differently. Tiny details, small inconsistencies, hairline cracks spreading through the illusion. He picked up one invoice from 11 months earlier and placed it beside another from 3 weeks ago. "Look here," he said. Marcus squinted. "What am I looking at?" "The font." Marcus frowned. "You serious?" Casey pointed again. "The hospital name changes slightly. Look at the spacing." Marcus leaned closer beneath the kitchen light. Sure enough, the lettering wasn't identical. One used slightly bolder text. The other appeared compressed. "That could just be different printers," Marcus said. "Maybe." Casey reached for another invoice. "And this one lists Vanderbilt Oncology Financial Services." Then another. "This one says Vanderbilt Medical Billing Division." Marcus flipped more pages. "Damn." Casey stood and walked toward the refrigerator. Inside sat leftover Chinese takeout bottled water, and almost nothing else. He grabbed 2 beers and handed one to Marcus before returning to the table. "You know what's bothering me most?" Marcus asked quietly. Casey opened the bottle. "What?" "You never once saw her at the hospital." Casey sat back down. "No, you didn't think that was strange. I asked a few times early on. And Vanessa said Diane didn't want visitors seeing her during chemo." Marcus shook his head slowly. "And you accepted that Casey took a long drink before answering." She sounded believable. The sentence lingered heavily between them. Marcus looked around the small kitchen. Cheap blinds, old appliances, water stain near the ceiling from a roof leak Casey hadn't fixed yet because he kept postponing the expense. Then Marcus thought about the women boarding first class to Miami. His expression hardened. How much total Casey already knew the answer? 187,000. Marcus nearly dropped the beer bottle. "You paid almost 200 grand. Closer to 190. After last week." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "That's not help anymore, Casey. That's your entire damn life." Casey didn't argue, because Marcus was right. Every delayed purchase, every overtime shift, every holiday worked, all of it sat in those folders. Marcus leaned forward suddenly. "You need to call somebody tomorrow." "Who?" "A lawyer. A real one." Casey looked down at the invoices. "I signed the agreement voluntarily. Yeah, under false pretenses." Casey remained silent. Marcus lowered his voice. "Listen to me carefully. You do not call Vanessa tonight. You don't text her. You don't warn her. I wasn't planning to." "Good." Casey's calmness unsettled Marcus again. Most betrayed people wanted confrontation immediately. They wanted emotional release, revenge, noise. But Casey approached problems the same way he approached damaged machinery. Observe first. Understand the system. Then touch nothing until you know where pressure lines connect. That mindset probably saved him. Around midnight, Marcus finally left. Before walking out, he stopped near the front door. "You okay, Casey?" Considered the question honestly. "No." Marcus nodded once. "Call me tomorrow before work." After the truck disappeared down the wet street, Casey locked the door and returned to the kitchen table. The house felt colder now. He sat alone under the overhead light while rainwater slid slowly down the windows beside him. Then he began checking every invoice carefully, not emotionally, methodically, date by date, page by page, like an audit. For 2 hours, Casey compared headers, addresses, formatting, and billing structures. He used his laptop to search archived Vanderbilt billing examples online. The deeper he looked, the worse things became. One invoice listed a zip code tied to a downtown office building that no longer existed. Another used outdated hospital branding retired almost 3 years earlier. A third contained inconsistent spacing between medical codes. Tiny Miss Oaks. The kind careless people make when they assume nobody will verify details. Casey's exhaustion slowly transformed into something sharper. At 2:14 a.m., he found the first undeniable error. A typo. Not in the medical language, in the return mailing address. Tennessee. Missing one S. Casey stared at the word for several seconds. Then he stood abruptly and walked to the cabinet above the sink. He pulled down older invoices from previous months and spread them across the counter. 3 more carried the exact same typo. Tennessee. No legitimate hospital billing department would repeatedly misspell its own state. Casey leaned both hands against the kitchen counter. The realization landed slowly. Not because he lacked intelligence, because his brain resisted accepting the scale of the betrayal. 2 years. Not one desperate lie. Not one emotional mistake. A sustained operation, structured, repeated, calculated. He looked toward the dark living room where unopened moving boxes still sat against the wall. He could have bought a new truck, paid off the house years earlier, taken time off work, built something better for himself. Instead, he financed luxury vacations for the woman who used to mock his job. Casey closed his eyes briefly. Then he did something Marcus wouldn't have expected. He opened his banking app, not to send money, to download every transfer confirmation from the last 24 months, one by one. PDF files filled a desktop folder labeled Diane Medical Payments. By sunrise, Casey had built a complete digital timeline: invoices, transfers, text messages, dates. The system looked different now that emotion no longer blurred it. Too organized. Too rehearsed. At 6:07 a.m., Casey finally leaned back in the kitchen chair and rubbed both eyes. Outside, morning traffic had started moving through Antioch. His phone buzzed suddenly. Vanessa, a text message. Mom had another difficult night. Doctors may need to extend treatment again. Casey read it twice. No anger crossed his face, only stillness. Then another message arrived. Thank you for never giving up on her. Casey stared at the screen for a very long time. Finally, he placed the phone face down beside the invoices, and for the first time since the divorce, he stopped seeing Vanessa as someone he once loved. He started seeing her as a problem that needed evidence. Casey Price did not go to work the next morning. That alone felt unnatural. For nearly 11 years at Nashville International Airport, Casey had missed exactly 4 shifts. 1 for pneumonia, 2 after his father's funeral, 1 during the divorce hearing because the judge required both signatures in person. Now he sat at his kitchen table wearing a gray thermal shirt, while cold coffee turned stale beside his laptop. Rain clouds hung low across Antioch outside the windows. The invoices remained spread across the table, exactly where he left them at sunrise. Casey spent the first hour checking addresses, not emotions. Addresses. He typed each billing location into Google Maps one at a time. The first led to a real Vanderbilt administrative building downtown. The second pointed to a UPS store. The third showed an empty office complex with boarded windows near Brentwood. Casey leaned back slowly in his chair. No hospital system accidentally routed oncology payments through vacant property addresses. His phone buzzed again around 8:40 a.m. Vanessa, this time she called. Casey watched the screen vibrate for several seconds before answering. "Hey," Vanessa said softly. Her voice sounded warm. Concerned? Practiced. Casey kept his tone flat. "Morning. I texted you earlier." "I saw it." A brief pause. "Mom's having a rough week." Casey stared at the typo on one invoice while listening. "Tennessee. Still missing the second S." "How bad?" he asked. "She's exhausted. They're changing medications again." Casey heard traffic noise behind her. Distant music, too. Not hospital sounds. No overhead paging. No machines. No clinical echo. Vanessa continued speaking carefully. "The doctors are optimistic, but the costs are getting out of control." Casey said nothing. That silence seemed to make her uncomfortable now. "You still there?" "Yeah." Another pause. Then she lowered her voice slightly. "I know this has been hard on you too." Casey almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it sounded scripted. Instead, he asked quietly, "What hospital room is Diane in right now?" Vanessa hesitated. The hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. But Casey noticed. "She moved wings yesterday," Vanessa answered. "I don't remember the exact room." "What doctor's handling the treatment now?" "Casey." "What's his name?" A longer silence this time. "Then there are multiple specialists involved." Casey looked out the window toward the wet parking lot beside the liquor store across the street. "I see." Vanessa's voice sharpened slightly. "Why are you asking all this?" Casey's expression never changed, just trying to understand things better. The warmth disappeared completely from her tone after that. "Well, I have to go. I'll send the new billing paperwork later." Then she hung up first. Casey lowered the phone slowly onto the table. No anger, just confirmation. At 9:17 a.m., Casey called Vanderbilt University Medical Center directly, not the number listed on the invoices, the real number from the hospital website. After 15 minutes navigating automated menus and transfer departments, a woman from billing support finally answered. Vanderbilt Patient Financial Services. This is Carol. Casey sat straighter. Hi, I've been making oncology payments for a patient named Diane Holloway, and I need to verify some billing information. I can try to help with general questions, sir. Casey read one invoice number aloud. Keyboard clicking echoed faintly through the speaker. Then silence. I'm sorry, Carol said finally. That billing format doesn't match our current system. Casey's grip tightened slightly around the phone. What does that mean? It means the document you're referencing may not have originated through Vanderbilt billing. Casey stared at the wall. Coldness moved slowly through his chest. What about the patient herself? Diane Holloway. I can't discuss patient treatment records without authorization. I understand. He paused carefully. But can you tell me whether oncology invoices would normally come from a private processing center in Brentwood? Another keyboard pause. No, sir. Casey closed his eyes briefly. And the return address, spelling the state wrong. I'm sorry. It says Tennessee. This time, the woman sounded confused. That definitely wouldn't come from us. Casey thanked her politely and ended the call. Then he sat completely still for nearly a full minute, not because he doubted the truth anymore, because certainty felt heavier than suspicion. Suspicion still allowed hope. Certainty killed it. Outside, thunder rolled faintly above Nashville. Casey stood slowly and walked to the bathroom mirror. 43 years old, dark circles beneath his eyes, small gray strands appearing near his temples, a healing cut across his knuckles. 2 years erased from his life, not stolen by desperation, by greed. He washed cold water across his face and stared at himself longer than usual. Then he grabbed his truck keys. Marcus was waiting when Casey arrived outside the maintenance department at the airport just before noon. You actually took a day off, Marcus said immediately. Casey handed him printed screenshots from Google Maps. UPS store. Empty office building, fake billing locations. Marcus read silently. Then, oh, they're screwed. Casey remained calm. I called Vanderbilt, and they said the invoices aren't real. Marcus leaned against the side of the maintenance cart. Jesus Christ. For the first time since discovering the fraud, anger flickered briefly across Casey's face. Not explosive anger, the quieter kind, the kind that settles deep. Marcus noticed immediately. What you gonna do now? Casey looked across the tarmac where a Southwest jet rolled slowly toward departure. I need somebody who understands this better than me. A lawyer. Yeah. Marcus nodded once. I know someone. That surprised Casey. You do. My cousin used her during a property fraud case last year. Franklin attorney. Smart as hell. Marcus pulled out his phone and searched his contacts. Lauren Whitmore. Casey memorized the name silently. She. Good, Marcus snorted. She made a contractor pay back every dime he stole from my cousin. Casey looked down at the stack of invoices again. Every page now felt poisonous. Call her, Marcus said. Casey hesitated, not because he wanted to protect Vanessa anymore, because involving lawyers made everything irreversible. Once systems started moving, they rarely stopped cleanly. Marcus understood that hesitation immediately. You still thinking about protecting them? Casey answered honestly. I don't know what I'm thinking. Marcus lowered his voice. You know what bothers me most? What? That they counted on you being decent. The sentence landed hard because it was true. Vanessa never targeted a cruel man. Cruel men ask questions immediately. She targeted Casey because he kept promises long after emotions faded. That reliability became the weapon used against him. An hour later, Casey sat inside a law office in downtown Franklin. Whitmore Legal Group occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building overlooking Main Street. Dark wood floors, framed degrees, quiet jazz music playing somewhere in the background. Lauren Whitmore entered, carrying a legal pad and a black coffee. Late 30s, sharp navy blazer, controlled posture. The kind of person who noticed details before speaking. Casey immediately liked that. She shook his hand once and sat across from him at the conference table. Marcus had already emailed over several invoices before they arrived. Lauren opened the folder slowly. How long were you married? 10 years. How long have you been paying these bills? 24 months. Lauren read silently for several minutes. No reactions, no interruptions. Then she placed one invoice flat on the table. This is fake. Casey looked at her. You're sure? Yes. She slid another page beside it. So is this one. Then another, and this. Casey felt strangely calm, hearing it spoken aloud. Lauren leaned back slightly. Mr. Price, these weren't designed to survive scrutiny. They were designed to survive trust. The room went quiet. Outside the office windows, afternoon traffic moved slowly through downtown Franklin. Lauren folded her hands together. Tell me exactly when you first realized something was wrong. Casey reached into his jacket pocket. Then he placed his phone on the conference table and pressed play. Diane's voice filled the room softly. He still thinks I'm sick. Lauren Whitmore listened without blinking. When the recording ended, she looked directly at Casey for the first time and asked the question that changed everything. Do you want revenge? She said calmly. Or do you want the truth documented properly? Lauren Whitmore's office overlooked Main Street in downtown Franklin. But Casey Price barely noticed the view. His attention stayed fixed on the stack of invoices spread across the conference table. For 2 years, those papers represented sacrifice. Now, they looked like evidence. Lauren removed her reading glasses and folded them carefully beside her legal pad. Well, she asked calmly. Casey looked up. Well, what do you want? Revenge? She repeated. Or do you want this handled correctly? The question sounded simple. It wasn't. Revenge was emotional, loud, immediate. Handled correctly meant patience. Casey understood patience better than anger. I want the truth, he said quietly. Lauren studied him for a second longer, as if deciding whether he actually meant that. Most clients came into her office furious. They wanted dramatic confrontations and public humiliation. They wanted emotional satisfaction more than legal outcomes. Casey sat perfectly still instead. No shaking hands, no threats, no emotional speech about betrayal. Just exhaustion sharpened into focus. Lauren nodded once. "Good," she said. "Because if we do this correctly, we document every step before anybody gets warned." Marcus Bennett leaned back in his chair beside Casey. "So what happens now?" Lauren slid one invoice toward herself. "First, we verify exactly where the money went." Casey frowned slightly. "The invoices were fake. That doesn't automatically tell us where the funds landed." She tapped the transfer confirmations Casey brought with him. "These payments didn't disappear. Somebody received them." Casey had never thought beyond the deception itself. Lauren noticed immediately. "You assumed the money went directly to a hospital account." "Yeah. Maybe it did once," she said. "Maybe it never did." That possibility settled heavily across the room. Lauren opened another folder. "Mr. Price, how were payments made?" "Bank transfers mostly. A few cashier's checks early on." "Good. Easier to trace." Marcus crossed his arms. "So this is fraud, right?" Lauren's expression remained careful. "It potentially qualifies as several things." She began listing them calmly. Fraudulent misrepresentation, fabricated billing documentation, possible wire fraud depending on interstate transfers, potential mail fraud if falsified invoices were sent physically. Casey listened silently. The words sounded distant, technical. Not because he didn't understand them, because part of him still pictured Diane handing him hot food after his father's funeral years ago. Lauren seemed to notice that conflict in his face. "You still care about her," she observed. Casey answered honestly. "I cared about who I thought she was." That answer made Lauren pause briefly. Then she nodded once. Fair enough. She turned toward her computer and typed several notes quickly. "I'm bringing in someone else." "Another attorney?" Casey asked. "No. Forensic accountant." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Damn." Lauren ignored him and continued typing. People committing long-term financial deception usually make mistakes once money starts moving through multiple accounts. Casey thought about Vanessa standing at gate B12 beside luxury luggage. Do people really do this often? Lauren looked at him carefully. More often than decent people think. The sentence stayed with him. Decent people. Casey wasn't sure whether hearing that made him feel better or worse. An hour later, Lauren escorted them into another conference room, where a tall man in a charcoal suit waited beside an open laptop. Noah Grayson. Lauren introduced. Noah looked younger than Casey expected. Early 40s, maybe. Thin frame, precise movements, the kind of face that rarely showed emotion. He shook Casey's hand once. "Lauren briefed me already." Noah opened a spreadsheet. "Let's start with account routing numbers." Casey handed over printed transfer records. For the next 90 minutes, Noah worked almost silently. He compared routing information, transfer destinations, and payment histories, while Lauren occasionally asked questions. Casey mostly watched. The process felt strangely clinical, like doctors examining a body after death. Finally, Noah stopped typing. That's interesting. Lauren looked up immediately. What? These payments weren't going to Vanderbilt. Casey's jaw tightened slightly. Where were they going? Noah rotated the laptop screen toward them. A business entity appeared on the screen. Blue Cedar Consulting, LLC. Formation date, 3 months after the divorce. Registered in Tennessee. Managing member, Vanessa Price. Marcus sat upright immediately. No damn way. Noah kept scrolling calmly. The transfer account linked to these invoices routes directly into this LLC operating account. Casey stared at the screen without blinking. Blue Cedar Consulting. Not medical treatment. Not oncology support. A business account. Lauren folded her arms slowly. How much total? Noah clicked another tab. Direct transfers from Mr. Price appear to total approximately $187,000 over 24 months. Marcus muttered a curse under his breath. But Noah wasn't finished. Funds then dispersed into multiple outgoing expenses. He scrolled again. Condominium payments, luxury vehicle lease charges, travel bookings, retail purchases. Casey's face remained still, but something colder settled deeper behind his eyes with every line item. Miami Condo Association fees. Scottsdale Resort reservations. Lexus Financial Services. Vanessa hadn't just stolen survival money. She had converted his overtime hours into lifestyle upgrades. Lauren looked toward Casey carefully. You okay? Casey kept staring at the screen. Yeah. Marcus snorted softly. No, he ain't. But Casey barely heard him anymore. His mind replayed every exhausted night over the past 2 years. Every skipped expense. Every broken thing he delayed fixing. Every shift worked while Vanessa drank cocktails beside ocean views. Noah clicked one final document open. This part matters. A scanned signature authorization form appeared. Diane Holloway's signature. Casey recognized it instantly. He had seen it on birthday cards and Christmas checks years earlier. Marcus leaned closer. She knew Noah answered carefully. She appears connected to the account activity. The room fell quiet. That truth hurt Casey more than Vanessa. Because Vanessa had already emotionally left long before the divorce. But Diane had looked him in the eye for years. Lauren finally broke the silence. Mr. Price, from this point forward, you do not contact either woman directly unless I advise it. Casey nodded once. No social media posts, no confrontation, no emotional text messages. I understand. Lauren looked relieved hearing that. Most clients ignored that instruction within hours. Casey wouldn't. Not because he lacked emotion. Because he now understood the value of evidence. Noah closed the laptop halfway. There's another thing. Lauren looked over. What? The LLC account balance dropped significantly after the Miami trip. Casey finally spoke again. What does that mean? It means they may already suspect money flow problems are coming. Marcus frowned. You think they know? Casey figured it out. No, Noah said, but people running scams usually spend aggressively near the end. The sentence hung in the air ominously. Lauren leaned forward. "Can you freeze assets?" "Not yet," Noah replied. "Need formal filings first." Lauren nodded thoughtfully. Then Casey's phone buzzed. Vanessa. Everyone at the table saw the name. Marcus muttered, "Speak of the devil." Lauren held out her hand immediately. "Don't answer emotionally." Casey looked at the screen. The phone continued vibrating, then stopped. A voicemail notification appeared seconds later. Casey played it on speaker. Vanessa's voice filled the conference room softly. "Hey, call me when you get this. Mom had another appointment this morning, and there may be a treatment extension. I know you're probably busy at work." A small pause. Then, "And thank you again. Seriously, I don't know what we would have done without you." The message ended. Nobody spoke for several seconds afterward. Finally, Marcus laughed once. Not humor. Disbelief. "She's good." Lauren looked toward Casey. "How do you want to proceed?" Casey stared at the silent phone, then at the spreadsheets, showing where his money really went. 2 years ago, he would have transferred another payment immediately after hearing Vanessa cry. Now he noticed details instead. No hospital sounds behind her voice. No fear. No urgency. Just performance. Casey slowly locked the phone screen. Then he looked directly at Lauren Whitmore. "Document everything he said quietly." Lauren nodded once. For the first time since entering the law office, Casey no longer looked like a tired maintenance worker, drowning in somebody else's lies. He looked like a man finally learning the system he'd been trapped inside. And across the conference table, Lauren Whitmore started building a case. 3 days after meeting Lauren Whitmore, Casey Price returned to work at Nashville International Airport like nothing had happened. That was part of the strategy. No confrontation, no emotional reaction, no warning signs. Lauren wanted Vanessa comfortable. Comfortable people made mistakes. Casey moved through the airport exactly as before. Same faded uniform, same dented toolbox, same black coffee carried through maintenance corridors before sunrise. But internally, something fundamental had changed. For 2 years, Casey walked through life believing he was helping someone survive cancer. Now every memory felt contaminated. At 5:40 a.m., he stood inside a mechanical service tunnel beneath Concourse C, tightening pressure fittings on a refrigeration line, while Marcus Bennett leaned against the wall nearby drinking gas station coffee. "You sleeping at all?" Marcus asked. Casey kept working. "Some." "That means no." Casey tightened the final fitting and wiped his hands with a rag. Above them, passenger footsteps echoed faintly through the ceiling structure. Marcus lowered his voice. "You hear anything else from Vanessa?" "She texted yesterday." "What did she say?" Casey pulled out his phone and handed it over. Marcus read silently. "Mom's feeling weak after treatment. Doctors may extend the Miami recovery stay another week." Marcus looked up slowly. "Miami recovery stay." Casey said nothing. Marcus laughed once under his breath. "She's not even trying anymore." But Casey noticed something else. No urgency in the message. No direct request for money. That usually meant another invoice was coming soon. He was right. At 9:13 a.m. an email arrived while Casey repaired a broken baggage carousel sensor. Subject urgent. Oncology balance notice. Attached balance $22,481.16. Experimental emergency surgical support. Casey stared at the number on his cracked phone screen while conveyor motors rattled nearby. $22,000. Lauren had instructed him carefully before this stage. Do not refuse payment immediately. Do not accuse anyone. Keep communication open. Let them continue the pattern. So Casey forwarded the email directly to Lauren and Noah Grayson without replying. 32 minutes later, Lauren called. Don't pay this one yet, she said immediately. Casey stepped into a quieter service hallway near gate C7. You sure? Yes. What if she notices? She will. Lauren sounded calm as always. That's useful. Casey leaned against the wall. So now what? Noah traced additional account activity overnight. Casey waited. Lauren continued. The LLC isn't just receiving your transfers anymore. A bad feeling moved slowly through his stomach. What does that mean? It means Vanessa expanded the operation. Casey closed his eyes briefly. How? Credit lines, short-term business loans, luxury, lease agreements. Lauren paused. And we found something else. Casey listened carefully. Diane Holloway signed multiple financial documents tied to Blue Cedar Consulting. That hurt worse than hearing it the first time. Not because Casey still loved Vanessa, but because part of him kept hoping Diane had only known pieces of the lie. Now, that hope was disappearing too. Lauren continued speaking. Mr. Price, this wasn't impulsive fraud. This required planning. Casey looked through the service corridor window toward aircraft moving across the runway. How long? We don't know yet. But before the Miami trip. Yes. Casey nodded once, even though she couldn't see him. Machines made sense, because failures usually had causes. People were different. People could smile while dismantling your life quietly. That afternoon, Noah Grayson joined them remotely through video call from Lauren's office. Casey sat alone inside the airport maintenance break room during lunch while Noah shared financial spreadsheets across the screen. Blue Cedar Consulting, LLC, looked legitimate at first glance. Professional website, registered business address, tax identification numbers. Vanessa had built an entire shell structure around the fake medical payments. Noah enlarged another transaction history. There, he said. Casey leaned closer. A series of outgoing charges appeared. Lexus Financial Services, American Express Platinum, Four Seasons Scottsdale, the Fontainebleau Miami Beach. Marcus nearly choked on his sandwich reading the list. You paid for a damn penthouse suite. Casey stayed quiet. Noah clicked another file. Condominium association fees, property location, Miami Beach. Casey finally spoke. She bought property leased luxury condo space, Noah corrected. But yes, using transferred funds. Marcus shook his head slowly. This whole thing's insane. Noah's expression remained emotionless. No. What's insane is how long scams like this succeed when the victim trusts the offenders emotionally. Casey absorbed that silently. Victim. He still wasn't used to hearing himself described that way. Lauren appeared on screen beside Noah. We're preparing formal filings now, but I want more direct communication evidence first. Casey frowned slightly. What kind? Requests for money. She already sent invoices. I want conversational pressure, too. Casey understood immediately. Something documented. Something personal. Lauren continued. She believes you're still emotionally compliant. That's leverage. Casey almost hated how accurate that sounded. That night, Vanessa called again. Casey sat alone in his truck outside his house when the phone lit up across the dashboard. Rainwater streaked down the windshield beneath yellow streetlights. He answered calmly. Hey. Vanessa sounded tired, or performed tired well enough to sound convincing. Hey, sorry to bother you late. You're fine. A soft sigh came through the speaker. Mom had another bad consultation today. Casey stared at rain sliding across the glass. What happened? The doctors found additional complications. No hospital sounds again. Only faint music somewhere in the background. Restaurant music. Vanessa lowered her voice. I didn't want to ask this, Casey. There it was, the setup. He waited quietly. The surgical team needs confirmation within 48 hours. How much A? Pause. Then carefully, 18,000. Not 22 anymore. Casey noticed immediately. Different number than the invoice. What happened to the other balance? Another hesitation. The insurance adjusted part of it. Casey looked toward the dark liquor store across the street. You said emergency surgery. It is. So why did the amount change? Vanessa's breathing shifted slightly. Casey, I'm exhausted right now. That answer told him enough. But he kept his voice even. What hospital is she at tonight? She's staying with me after the consultation. Casey nodded slowly. And the doctor? Another pause. Dr. Reynolds. No last name, no department, nothing specific. Lauren had been right. Comfortable liars relied on emotional momentum instead of details. Vanessa continued speaking softly. I know things ended badly between us, but you've always been there when it mattered. Casey closed his eyes briefly. 2 years ago, that sentence would have broken him emotionally. Now it sounded transactional, like hearing a rehearsed sales pitch. Still, he played his role carefully. I'll see what I can do. Vanessa exhaled with immediate relief. Thank you. Then she added something unexpected. You're still the only person I can depend on. Casey almost answered honestly. No, I'm the only person you thought wouldn't verify anything. But he stayed silent. After hanging up, he forwarded the entire call recording to Lauren. Her reply came 12 minutes later. Good. Keep everything. Casey sat in the truck a while longer after that. The heater hummed softly while rain hammered the roof overhead. Inside the glove compartment sat unpaid invoices, totaling nearly $23,000. For the first time since the divorce, Casey didn't feel guilty refusing to send money immediately. Instead, he felt something colder, distance, Not emotional distance, strategic distance. The kind that allowed him to finally observe Vanessa clearly instead of through loyalty. At 11:08 p.m., another email arrived. New attached invoice. Different format again. Different billing codes. Different amount. Casey downloaded it automatically and sent it to Lauren. 5 minutes later, she replied with only one sentence. Now she's getting sloppy. Casey stared at those words while thunder rolled faintly above Nashville. Then he opened the invoice one more time. And this time, instead of seeing medical treatment, he saw what Lauren saw. Evidence. The next 48 hours became a test of patience. Not for Vanessa. For Casey Price. Every instinct inside him wanted resolution now. Not shouting, not revenge, just an ending. He wanted the lying to stop. He wanted somebody to finally say the truth out loud without disguising it behind invoices and soft voices. But Lauren Whitmore kept repeating the same instruction. People reveal themselves most clearly when they think they still have control. So, Casey waited. And Vanessa kept talking. The first call came Tuesday morning while Casey stood inside a freezing maintenance corridor beneath Terminal A, replacing a damaged condenser fan motor. The airport around him vibrated with movement, rolling luggage overhead, security announcements, jet engines muffled through layers of concrete and steel. His phone buzzed across the open toolbox. Vanessa. Casey answered and immediately placed the phone on speaker exactly the way Lauren instructed him. "Hey," he said calmly. Vanessa sounded breathless this time. Not crying. Breathless. Manufactured urgency. "Casey, I just got out of the consultation." He tightened a bolt slowly while listening. "How's Diane?" They moved her into surgical prep. Casey's wrench stopped for half a minute. Surgical prep where St. Thomas Midtown. That was new. Not Vanderbilt. Interesting. Casey kept his voice neutral. What happened to Vanderbilt? They referred her out for the procedure. What procedure? A tiny hesitation. Then, it's complicated. Casey stared at the refrigeration unit in front of him. Real people answering real medical questions usually used specifics automatically. Room numbers, doctor names, departments. Liars preferred emotional fog. "What's the surgeon's name?" he asked. Vanessa exhaled sharply. "Casey, does that really matter right now?" "Yes." Silence. Then Dr. Reynolds. Again. Still no first name, no specialty, no details. Casey continued tightening bolts while cold air hissed around him. What kind of surgeon? "I don't know." "Okay," Vanessa snapped suddenly. "I'm trying to hold everything together right now." There it was. Pressure. Lauren predicted that too. Once details failed, Vanessa redirected toward emotion. Casey remained quiet long enough for her breathing to settle again. Then her voice softened immediately. "I'm sorry. I'm exhausted. It's okay. We just need the transfer before tomorrow morning." "How much exactly?" $18,400. Different again. Casey noticed every number change now. Every inconsistency. Every tiny adjustment. He pulled off one work glove and wiped grease across a rag slowly. Send me the paperwork again. I already did. Send it one more time. Another pause. Why? Because the amount changed? Vanessa laughed nervously. It's hospital billing, Casey. It changes constantly. He said nothing. The silence forced her to keep talking. You know how this works. Actually, he didn't. That was the point. For 2 years, Vanessa depended on him, not understanding medical systems. But now, Lauren and Noah understood them very well. Vanessa lowered her voice again. I know we're divorced. I know I probably don't deserve this after everything that happened between us. Casey leaned against the cold concrete wall. But you're still the only person keeping my mother alive. The sentence hit differently now. Not painful, manipulative, almost mechanical. Casey finally answered quietly. I'll review the paperwork tonight. Relief flooded her voice instantly. Thank you. Then the line disconnected. Casey stared at the phone screen for several seconds before forwarding the entire recording to Lauren. 5 minutes later, she called. Excellent. Casey walked farther down the maintenance corridor, away from airport noise. She changed hospitals. I noticed. And the numbers changed again. I noticed that, too. Lauren sounded almost pleased. Not emotionally pleased. Professionally. The more pressure she feels, the more inconsistent the story becomes. Casey rubbed the back of his neck. So what now? We pushed carefully. That afternoon, Casey met Lauren and Noah again at Whitmore Legal Group. Noah already had the new invoice displayed on a monitor when Casey entered the conference room. This one's worse, Noah said immediately. Lauren handed Casey a printed copy. At first glance, it looked official enough. Hospital logo, procedure codes, emergency billing language. But now, Casey saw the flaws immediately himself. The formatting margins were different. The footer alignment shifted halfway through page 2. One Shesha used Arial font, while another used Helvetica. Small mistakes. Lazy mistakes. Lauren pointed toward the bottom signature line. This is important. Casey leaned closer. The authorization signature belonged to a physician named Dr. Michael Reynolds. Noah typed quickly into another window. No licensed surgical oncologist in Tennessee by that name, he said flatly. Casey stared at the fake signature. For a strange moment, embarrassment hit harder than anger again. Not because Vanessa fooled him, because she apparently believed fooling him required so little effort. Lauren watched him carefully. What are you thinking? Casey answered honestly. I think she stopped respecting me a long time ago. The room stayed quiet. Then Noah clicked another document open. Blue Cedar Consulting received 3 new deposits yesterday. Casey frowned. From who to small business loans. 1 personal line of credit. Lauren folded her arms. She's running out of liquid cash. Noah nodded. And increasing risk exposure. Casey sat down slowly. So she needs another payment. Yes, Lauren said. Probably urgently. That explained the pressure. The emotional tone. The sudden surgery story. The repeated calls. Vanessa wasn't maintaining the lie anymore. She was trying to feed it. Lauren slid another paper toward Casey. A draft legal filing. Casey read silently. Fraudulent inducement. Fabricated medical documentation. Financial misrepresentation. Seeing everything written formally made the situation feel larger suddenly. Real. Not emotional betrayal anymore. A case. Lauren watched him carefully. Once this is filed, things escalate quickly. Casey nodded slowly. I know. You still okay? Moving forward. That question mattered. Because courts cared about evidence, not heartbreak. Casey looked at the stack of fake invoices beside the legal paperwork. Then he remembered the airport gate. Diane laughing, Vanessa smiling. First-class boarding passes. Yes, he said quietly. Lauren nodded once. Good. That night, Vanessa called again. Third time in less than 2 days. Casey answered from his kitchen, while leftover pasta turned cold beside him untouched. This time, Vanessa skipped the warm opening entirely. Casey, I need to know if the transfer went through. Straight to pressure now. No. Silence. Then, what do you mean no? I'm still reviewing the paperwork. A sharp exhale came through the speaker. What's there to review? Casey leaned back slowly in his chair. The surgery details. It's emergency surgery. You've said that. Another silence. Then Vanessa spoke carefully again, resetting her tone. Look, I know this is a lot. Casey noticed she no longer mentioned Diane directly as much. Not emotionally, only functionally. We're talking about my mother's life, she continued. Then give me the surgeon's information. Silence again. Longer this time. Finally, why are you doing this? That question revealed something important. Vanessa felt resistance now. For 2 years, Casey transferred money without friction. Questions disrupted the system. Casey answered calmly. Because the numbers keep changing. You think I'm lying? The irony almost made him smile. But his voice stayed flat. I think I want documentation. Vanessa's breathing sharpened. Then, for the first time since all this began, anger slipped through fully. After everything I have dealt with, you suddenly decide to become suspicious. Casey looked at the invoices across his table. Tennessee, misspelled, repeatedly. No, he said quietly. I decided to start paying attention. The line went dead instantly. Vanessa hung up. Casey lowered the phone slowly. No yelling afterward. No insults. No emotional collapse. Just silence inside the kitchen. Then his laptop chimed. New email, another invoice attachment, different amount again, different formatting. And this time the fake hospital logo appeared slightly blurry from being copied too many times. Casey opened the PDF carefully, then forwarded it directly to Lauren. Her response arrived less than 3 minutes later. Now she committed mail fraud too. Casey stared at the sentence while rain drifted softly against the kitchen windows. And for the first time since this started, he realized something important. Vanessa wasn't losing control because Casey became emotional. She was losing control because Casey finally became calm. The Davidson County Courthouse smelled like old, paper-polished wood and burnt coffee. Casey Price noticed that immediately, The morning of the hearing, rainwater still darkened the courthouse steps outside as attorneys moved through metal detectors carrying leather briefcases and overfilled folders. Nashville traffic crawled past the building beneath gray November skies, while reporters gathered near another courtroom down the hall for an unrelated corruption case. None of them cared about Casey. That suited him perfectly. He arrived wearing the only suit he still owned. Dark charcoal, slightly outdated cut. The jacket sleeves a little too short at the wrists because he bought it years earlier, before overtime shifts thickened his shoulders and arms. Marcus Bennett met him near the elevators. "You clean up decent," Marcus muttered. Casey adjusted his tie once. "It still fits." "Barely." Lauren Whitmore approached moments later carrying 2 thick binders and a tablet computer. Her expression looked exactly the same as always. Controlled, prepared, cold in the useful way. "You sleep?" she asked Casey quietly. "Some." That meant no. Lauren already knew that. "Good enough," she said. Casey looked down the hallway toward courtroom 4C. "You think she'll settle before this starts?" Lauren shook her head immediately. "No." "Why?" "Because people who build lies this large usually believe they can still manage perception." Marcus snorted softly. "She's about to manage a disaster." Lauren ignored the comment. "Remember something important today," she told Casey. "We are not here to prove you were emotionally hurt." Casey nodded once. "We are here to prove documented fraud." That distinction mattered. Feelings didn't win cases. Paperwork did. At 8:52 a.m., Vanessa Price entered the hallway. Casey recognized her perfume before he fully looked up. She walked beside a tall attorney in a navy suit, carrying a silver laptop case. Expensive, confident, corporate-style litigation posture. Vanessa herself looked immaculate. Cream wool coat, perfect makeup, hair styled carefully over one shoulder. Nothing about her resembled someone supposedly drowning beneath medical catastrophe. Casey noticed something else, too. No Diane. Not yet. Vanessa saw him near the courtroom doors and slowed slightly. For half a second, something uncertain crossed her face. Not guilt. Calculation. She approached carefully. Casey. His expression didn't change. "Morning?" Vanessa looked surprised by his calmness. Her eyes moved briefly toward Lauren, then Marcus, then back to Kia again. "You really filed this," Lauren answered before Casey could. "My client documented extensive financial misconduct." Vanessa's attorney stepped forward immediately. "Daniel Mercer, representing Ms. Price." Lauren nodded once. "Lauren Whitmore." The two attorneys shook hands without warmth. Vanessa folded her arms tightly across her coat. "You could have called me first." Casey finally looked directly at her and said what? A brief silence. Vanessa lowered her voice. "You're acting like I stole from you." Nobody answered, because denying it would have sounded ridiculous. The courtroom doors opened moments later. Inside, everything felt colder. Dark wooden benches, state flags. Behind the judge's seat, muted fluorescent lighting. Judge Eleanor Pike entered exactly at 9 a.m., mid-60s, sharp silver hair, reading glasses low against her nose. The kind of judge who had spent decades watching people lie badly beneath oath. The hearing began formally. Case numbers, appearances, preliminary statements. Then Daniel Mercer stood first for Vanessa. He moved smoothly across the courtroom floor with practiced confidence. Your Honor, he began, this case is fundamentally an emotional dispute between divorced individuals complicated by medical hardship. Casey sat motionless beside Lauren. Mercer continued. Ms. Price's mother has undergone legitimate medical treatment over several years. My client relied on support voluntarily offered during divorce negotiations. Voluntarily. Interesting word. Mercer turned slightly toward the judge. What we have here is not fraud. We have resentment. Vanessa lowered her eyes at exactly the right moment. Performance. Carefully measured. Mercer kept going. Mr. Price now regrets financial decisions made during an emotionally difficult divorce and seeks to reinterpret generosity as victimization. Marcus shifted angrily beside Casey. Lauren touched his arm once without looking at him. Not yet, Mercer finished confidently. Unfortunately, failed marriages often produce bitterness. Then he sat down. Judge Pike turned toward Lauren. Ms. Whitmore. Lauren stood calmly. No dramatic gestures, no emotional tone, just structure. Your Honor, she said, this case is not about failed marriage. It is about fabricated medical documentation, fraudulent billing representations, and systematic financial deception conducted over 24 months. She placed the first binder onto the evidence table. The plaintiff transferred on approximately $187,000 under the belief these funds supported ongoing oncology treatment. Lauren opened the binder carefully. The evidence will show the medical invoices were falsified. Mercer immediately rose. Objection. Conclusion without foundation. Foundation is coming, Lauren replied smoothly. Judge Pike nodded. Proceed. Lauren began slowly. Transfer records first. Dates, amounts, routing numbers. Every document projected clearly onto courtroom monitors. Casey watched Vanessa carefully while Lauren walked through the evidence. At first, Vanessa remained composed, almost bored. Then Noah Grayson took the stand. The mood shifted immediately. Noah explained financial tracing with surgical precision. Calm voice. No emotion. Just numbers moving through systems. He identified Blue Cedar Consulting, LLC. He identified Vanessa Price as managing member. Then he displayed transaction histories. Miami condominium payments, luxury vehicle leases, travel expenses. Judge Pike adjusted her glasses slightly while reviewing the exhibits. Mercer objected repeatedly. Relevance, speculation, improper characterization. But the documents remained. One after another. Casey never spoke. He simply watched the system work. For 2 years, Vanessa controlled the narrative emotionally. Inside the courtroom, emotion mattered far less than timestamps. Lauren then introduced the airport recording. Mercer objected again immediately. Improper context. Lauren remained calm. The recording demonstrates state of mind and knowledge regarding ongoing misrepresentation. Judge Pike allowed limited review. The audio played softly through courtroom speakers. Diane's laugh filled the room. He still thinks I'm sick. Silence followed. Real silence, this time. Not courtroom silence. Human silence. Even Mercer stopped moving for a moment. Casey looked toward Vanessa. For the first time all morning, her composure cracked slightly. Not panic, anger. Her jaw tightened visibly. Lauren didn't press theatrically. She simply moved to the next exhibit. The fake invoices. One by one. Misspelled addresses. Invalid medical codes. Non-existent physicians. Judge Pike examined several pages personally before speaking. These were sent directly to Mr. Price. Yes, Your Honor, Lauren answered. And payment demands escalated over time. Yes. Mercer stood again. There is still no proof my client personally fabricated any document. Lauren nodded slightly. Understood. Then she placed another exhibit onto the projector. Signed authorization form, tied to Blue Cedar Consulting. Diane Holloway's signature. Vanessa's account management access. The courtroom grew quieter with every page. Casey noticed Vanessa stopped making eye contact entirely now. Instead, she whispered constantly with Mercer, while flipping rapidly through her own paperwork. Lauren finally stepped back from the evidence table. Your Honor, the plaintiff is not alleging misunderstanding. She looked directly toward the judge. He is alleging organized deception. Judge Pike leaned back slightly in her chair. Then she looked toward the defense table. Where is Ms. Holloway today? Mercer adjusted his tie. She was unavailable this morning due to health. The courtroom doors opened suddenly. Everyone turned. Diane Holloway entered, wearing a dark green coat and pearl earrings. Healthy, walking normally. Casey felt something strange inside his chest, seeing her again. Not rage, grief. Because this woman once mattered to him. Diane avoided looking directly at Casey while taking her seat beside Vanessa. Judge Pike watched the interaction carefully. Then she adjusted her glasses again and spoke calmly. Ms. Holloway, she said you may need to testify today. And for the first time since the hearing began, Casey saw real uncertainty move across Vanessa Price's face. Diane Holloway walked to the witness stand without assistance. That mattered more than anything she could possibly say. Casey Price watched her carefully from the plaintiff's table, while the courtroom remained almost unnaturally quiet. Diane moved steadily, in low black heels, one hand resting lightly against the wooden railing beside the witness box. No trembling, no weakness. No signs of a woman supposedly near death after years of aggressive cancer treatment. Judge Eleanor Pike noticed it too. Everyone did. Diane adjusted her green coat carefully before sitting down. A courthouse clerk stepped forward with the Bible, while Mercer whispered something urgently into her ear. Casey couldn't hear the words, but he could read the fear behind them. Not fear of prison, fear of losing control of the story. After being sworn in, Diane folded both hands tightly in her lap. Lauren Whitmore approached the witness stand slowly. No aggression in her posture, no raised voice. That almost made the questioning more dangerous. "Good morning, Ms. Holloway." Diane nodded stiffly. "Good morning." Lauren opened a thin folder. "You understand you're under oath today?" "Yes." "You were diagnosed with cancer approximately 3 years ago." "Yes." "That diagnosis was real?" "Yes." Lauren nodded once. "We are not disputing that." Mercer relaxed slightly at the defense table. "Too early," Lauren continued calmly. "When did you complete your final chemotherapy treatment?" A pause. Diane glanced briefly toward Vanessa. "About a year ago." Lauren checked a document. "1 year exactly. I don't remember the exact date." "That's understandable." Lauren stepped closer to the witness stand. "Would reviewing medical records help refresh your memory?" Diane hesitated. "Yes." Lauren handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to Diane. Casey watched Diane's face carefully while she read. Her expression changed almost immediately. Small shift, barely visible. But Casey noticed. Lauren waited. Ms. Holloway. Diane swallowed once. "It says remission began 18 months ago." The courtroom stayed silent. Casey looked down briefly at the table. 18 months. That meant most of the money came after treatment effectively ended. Lauren's voice remained calm. "So by the time Mr. Price continued making the majority of these payments, you were already in remission." Mercer stood immediately. "Objection. Mischaracterizes ongoing care requirements." Judge Pike looked toward Diane herself. Was she actively undergoing chemotherapy? During that period, Diane hesitated again. "No." Mercer closed his eyes briefly. Lauren continued before he could recover. "Did you inform Mr. Price that you had entered remission?" Diane looked toward Vanessa again. "No." "Why not long silence? The kind that becomes heavier every second." Finally, Vanessa handled the finances. Lauren didn't react outwardly. "Did you know Mr. Price believed he was funding ongoing emergency cancer treatment?" "Yes." "Did you correct him?" "No." Casey felt Marcus shift beside him angrily. But Casey himself stayed still. His eyes remained fixed on Diane. Not because he expected remorse anymore, because part of him still searched for the woman who once called him dependable. Lauren moved carefully now, not rushing. People revealed more when allowed room to speak. "Ms. Holloway, were you aware of Blue Cedar Consulting, LLC?" Another hesitation. "Yes." "Did you sign financial documents connected to that company?" "Yes." Mercer stood again. "Your Honor, my client's mother is elderly and was not directly involved in financial management," Lauren interrupted smoothly. "Then she should have no difficulty explaining why medical support payments entered a consulting company account." Judge Pike nodded once. Overruled. Mercer sat back down hard. Lauren turned toward Diane again. "Did you ever personally review the invoices sent to Mr. Price?" Diane's hands tightened together visibly. A few, yes." Lauren picked up one exhibit from the evidence table. "Do you recognize this invoice?" "Yes." It requested $14,000 for advanced oncology infusion therapy? Yes. Lauren held the document higher. This invoice was sent 9 months after your remission began. No answer. Lauren's tone sharpened slightly for the first time. Did you know that? Yes. The word barely came out. Casey stared at the witness stand quietly. Not anger, just confirmation. Lauren took another step forward. Did you ever tell Mr. Price that you no longer required active treatment? No. Why not? Diane closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, she looked older suddenly. Smaller, not physically, morally. Vanessa said. Diane stopped. Lauren waited patiently. What did Vanessa say? Diane swallowed hard. She said Casey owed the family. A faint sound moved through the courtroom gallery behind them. Even Judge Pike looked up sharply at that answer. Casey didn't move at all, but internally, something final settled into place. Owed the family. Not appreciated, not trusted, used. Lauren let the silence sit intentionally before continuing. What exactly did she mean by that? Diane stared down at her folded hands. She thought he wasted her life. Marcus muttered something furious under his breath. Judge Pike shot him a warning glance immediately. Lauren remained composed. And therefore, Diane's voice weakened slightly. She said he could afford to help. Casey almost laughed at the afford. He remembered repairing his own leaking sink because he postponed hiring a plumber. He remembered skipping vacations for years. He remembered calculating grocery costs beside utility bills late at night. Vanessa always confused reliability with unlimited capacity. Lauren picked up another document. This signature belongs to you. Diane nodded slowly. Yes, and this authorized transfer access into Blue Cedar Consulting? Yes. You understood. Those accounts received money from Mr. Price? Yes. Casey noticed Vanessa whispering aggressively toward Mercer now. Mercer looked significantly less confident than earlier that morning. Lauren paused before her next question. Then, did you ever believe what was happening was wrong? Diane finally looked toward Casey directly. For the first time all day, the eye contact lasted only seconds. But Casey saw something there. Not innocence, regret. Too late. Yes, Diane said quietly. The courtroom remained completely still. Lauren softened her tone slightly. Then why continue? Diane's answer came slower now. Because... After a while, it became easier not to stop. That sentence hit Casey harder than the lies themselves, because it sounded true, not dramatic, human. Lauren nodded once. No further questions. Mercer stood quickly adjusting his tie. He approached the witness stand carefully, clearly recalculating strategy in real time. Mr. Holloway, he began. Your daughter supported you emotionally throughout your illness, correct? Yes. And Mr. Price voluntarily continued financial assistance after the divorce. Yes. Mercer paced slowly. So nobody physically forced him to make payments? Diane hesitated. No. Mercer seized on that immediately. and your daughter believed those payments represented continued support obligations. Lauren objected instantly. Calls for speculation regarding another individual's beliefs. Sustained, Judge Pike replied. Mercer adjusted again. Did Vanessa ever explicitly tell you she intended to commit fraud? The courtroom quieted. Diane looked toward Vanessa once more. Vanessa's expression remained perfectly still now, controlled, cold. Diane answered carefully, "No." Mercer nodded quickly. No further questions. But the damage was already done. Everyone in the room understood it. The issue was no longer whether Casey had been misled. The issue was how, deliberately. Judge Pike removed her glasses slowly. "Ms. Holloway," she said calmly, "you may step down." Diane rose carefully from the witness stand. For one brief second, Casey thought she might approach him. Apologize, maybe. Explain something. Instead, she walked directly back beside Vanessa without speaking. Vanessa never looked at Casey once, not after her mother admitted the truth under oath. Lauren returned quietly to the plaintiff's table. Marcus leaned closer immediately. She cracked. Lauren kept organizing documents calmly. Not enough yet. Casey looked toward the defense table where Vanessa whispered urgently, with Mercer. What happens now? Lauren glanced toward the remaining evidence binder still unopened beside her. Then she answered quietly. Now we show the court what your ex-wife said when she thought nobody would ever check anything. And for the first time that morning, Casey saw real concern enter Daniel Mercer's face. The courtroom felt different after Diane Holloway stepped down from the witness stand. Heavier. Before her testimony, the case still carried space for interpretation. Emotional confusion, miscommunication, complicated divorce dynamics. After her testimony, the lies had structure. And structure was dangerous. Casey Price sat quietly beside Lauren Whitmore, while Daniel Mercer whispered urgently into Vanessa's ear across the courtroom. Vanessa no longer looked polished and relaxed like she had earlier that morning. Now she looked alert. Cornered people always became more attentive. Judge Eleanor Pike reviewed several documents silently before looking back toward Lauren. You indicated additional evidence, Ms. Whitmore. Yes, Your Honor. Lauren stood smoothly and lifted the final binder from the table. Casey noticed Marcus Bennett lean slightly forward beside him. Even Marcus hadn't seen everything yet. Lauren opened the binder carefully. During discovery preparation, she began calmly. Mr. Price provided archived electronic communications spanning approximately 2 years. Mercer immediately stood. We object to speculative interpretation of informal private communication. Lauren didn't even look at him. The messages speak for themselves. Judge Pike nodded once. Proceed. Lauren connected her tablet to the courtroom display system. An email appeared on the monitor. From Vanessa Price to Diane Holloway. Subject. He won't question it. Casey hadn't seen this message until 2 nights earlier. Noah recovered it from archived cloud backups Casey forgot still existed inside an old shared storage account created during the marriage. Lauren began reading aloud. Casey still thinks treatment is getting worse. Just keep conversations vague if he asks questions. Silence filled the courtroom. Lauren continued. He feels guilty anytime your health comes up. Honestly, he'll probably never check anything. Mercer objected immediately. Context missing? Lauren nodded slightly. Let's add more context. Then, another message appeared. This one dated 11 months earlier. Vanessa wrote, He's picking up extra shifts again. I almost feel bad sometimes. Diane's reply appeared underneath. Then stop. Vanessa's response came 30 seconds later. He owes us after wasting 10 years of my life. Casey kept his eyes forward. No visible reaction. But internally, those words landed harder than he expected. Because they answered something he quietly wondered since the divorce. Not why Vanessa left. Why she stopped seeing him as human before she left. Lauren changed slides again. Another email. This one discussed invoice formatting problems. Make sure the hospital logo isn't blurry. This time, Marcus muttered softly beside Casey. Unbelievable. Judge Pike looked directly at Vanessa now. Not emotionally, judicially, which was worse. Lauren continued methodically. No dramatic speeches, no courtroom theatrics. Just sequence after sequence, showing planning. Fake invoice drafts. Payment discussions. Conversations about Casey working overtime. One message froze the room completely. Vanessa wrote, The sad part is he actually thinks he's saving your life. Nobody moved. Even Mercer stopped objecting briefly. Casey stared at the screen without blinking. For 2 years, he woke up at 4 a.m, believing exactly that, saving someone's life. Lauren turned toward Judge Pike calmly. The plaintiff's continued payments were not voluntary charity in any meaningful legal sense. They were induced through sustained deception. Mercer stood again quickly. Your Honor, emotional language aside, Mr. Price still made independent financial decisions. Lauren nodded once. Correct. Based on fabricated medical emergencies. Judge Pike folded her hands together thoughtfully. Continue? Lauren called Noah Grayson back to the stand. Noah adjusted the microphone slightly before opening several financial charts. Using bank records, LLC filings, and transactional tracing, I reconstructed the movement of funds received from Mr. Price. He displayed a timeline. Casey recognized every payment instantly. Each transfer represented overtime hours, lost weekends, exhaustion. Noah continued calmly. Funds entering Blue Cedar Consulting were rapidly redistributed into non-medical expenditures. The screen changed. Luxury retail purchases, travel reservations, vehicle lease payments, condominium expenses. Noah pointed toward one highlighted section. Approximately $43,000 funded a Miami Beach condo lease and associated living expenses. Marcus shook his head slowly again. Judge Pike examined the figures carefully. Any evidence these funds supported legitimate medical treatment? Your Honor. Mercer rose. Cross-examination. He approached Noah carefully. Mr. Grayson, you are not claiming every expenditure by my client was improper. No, and people with medical trauma sometimes spend money emotionally? Yes, Mercer nodded quickly. So, lifestyle purchases alone do not establish fraud. No, Noah answered calmly. The fabricated invoices establish fraud. The courtroom grew quiet again. Mercer shifted direction. You cannot prove Vanessa Price personally designed every invoice. Noah remained expressionless. No, but I can prove the money resulting from those invoices entered accounts under her direct control. Mercer stopped pacing. That answer hurt. Everyone knew it. Noah continued without emotion. In forensic accounting, intent is often inferred through repetition and concealment patterns. Judge Pike wrote something down immediately. Mercer ended cross-examination shortly afterward because there wasn't much left to attack. The evidence no longer depended on Casey's emotions. It depended on documented systems. Lauren stood once more after Noah stepped down. Your Honor, one final item. She looked toward Casey briefly, then toward the judge again, Mr. Price himself. Casey hadn't expected that. He looked toward Lauren quietly. She gave only a small nod. Time. Casey walked toward the witness stand calmly. No shaking hands. No dramatic posture. Just the same steady movement he used carrying tools through airport terminals every morning. After being sworn in, he sat down beneath the courtroom lights. Lauren approached gently. State your occupation. I work airport maintenance at Nashville International. How long? Almost 11 years. Lauren nodded. Did you continue making these payments? Because you believed Diane Holloway was undergoing active cancer treatment. Yes. Why? Casey thought about the answer carefully. Not legally. Personally. Because I believed people meant what they said. Silence settled heavily across the courtroom. Lauren didn't interrupt it. She let the simplicity stand on its own. Did you ever intend these payments to fund luxury travel or personal business expenses? No. Did you know Blue Cedar Consulting existed? No. Did you believe the medical invoices were legitimate? Yes. Lauren nodded once. No further questions. Mercer stood slowly for cross-examination. He approached Casey differently than he approached earlier witnesses. Less aggressive. Probably because Casey didn't look like a vindictive ex-husband. He looked tired. Mercer adjusted his tie. Mr. Price, you are clearly a hard-working man. Casey said nothing. You chose to continue supporting your former mother-in-law after divorce. Yes. So you cared deeply for her. I did. Mercer paced slowly. And despite your current feelings, Ms. Holloway really did suffer cancer. Yes. Mercer nodded carefully. So your ex-wife may simply have misunderstood the extent of continued treatment needs. Casey looked directly at him for the first time. No. Mercer paused. No. She knew exactly what she was doing. The courtroom stayed quiet. Mercer changed approach immediately. You sound very certain. Casey's voice remained calm. Because she stopped asking for help the moment I started asking questions. That answer landed harder than anger would have. Mercer tried once more. You're hurt by the divorce, aren't you? Casey considered the question honestly. Yes. Mercer seemed encouraged. And that hurt influences your perspective today. Casey looked briefly toward Vanessa, then back toward Mercer. No. Why not? Casey answered quietly. Because invoices don't accidentally misspell Tennessee for 2 years. A faint ripple of restrained laughter moved through the courtroom gallery. Even Judge Pike's expression shifted slightly. Mercer stopped questioning after that. There was nowhere useful left to go. Casey stepped down from the witness stand and returned beside Lauren. Across the courtroom, Vanessa sat perfectly still now. No whispers, no notes, no performance, just silence. Judge Pike removed her glasses slowly and looked over the courtroom. Then she spoke carefully. Based on the evidence presented thus far, this court finds substantial indication of deliberate financial deception. Vanessa finally looked up sharply. Judge Pike continued. Pending further proceedings, all accounts associated with Blue Cedar Consulting, LLC, are hereby frozen effective immediately. Mercer stood instantly. Your Honor, the judge raised one hand. That includes any attempt to transfer, conceal, or redistribute funds. Vanessa's face lost color for the first time all day. Not because of embarrassment, because the money just stopped moving. Judge Pike looked directly toward both legal teams. We will recess briefly before discussing settlement possibilities. Her gavel struck once, sharp, final. And across the courtroom, Casey realized something important. Vanessa never feared exposure. She feared losing access. Settlement Room 4B looked nothing like a courtroom. No elevated bench, no flags, no gallery seating, just a rectangular oak table beneath harsh fluorescent lights and a humming air vent that clicked every 30 seconds. Casey Price preferred it immediately. Courtrooms carried performance. Settlement rooms carried consequences. Lauren Whitmore entered first carrying 2 binders and a legal pad. Casey followed quietly behind her while Marcus Bennett waited outside near the hallway vending machines. Across the table, Vanessa Price already sat beside Daniel Mercer. For the first time since this began, Vanessa looked tired. Actually tired. Not emotionally styled exhaustion with perfect makeup and soft lighting. Real strain. The court order freezing Blue Cedar Consulting accounts had changed things quickly. Noah Grayson already confirmed multiple outgoing transactions failed within the hour after Judge Pike's ruling. Money stopped moving. And suddenly, the fantasy lifestyle built on Casey's overtime shifts looked fragile. Mercer broke the silence first. My client is prepared to discuss resolution. Lauren sat down calmly. Good. No warmth, no satisfaction, just business. Casey remained silent beside her. Vanessa looked at him twice during the first few minutes, clearly expecting some emotional reaction, now that they sat only feet apart. She got nothing. That seemed to bother her more than anger would have. Mercer opened a folder. Before we proceed, I'd like to avoid unnecessary escalation involving criminal referrals. Lauren didn't blink. Then your client should have avoided unnecessary fraud. Mercer ignored the comment. We're willing to negotiate financial restitution. Casey watched Vanessa carefully. Even now, she never once said, "I'm sorry." Only numbers, risk, exposure. Lauren slid a document across the table. Full repayment schedule. Attorney fees, asset disclosures. Written admission regarding fabricated invoices. Vanessa looked up sharply. No. First, real emotion. All afternoon. Lauren folded her hands together. Then we continue litigation. You want me to sign a confession? I want documentation. Vanessa turned toward Casey finally. You're really doing this? Casey met her eyes calmly. You did this. A long silence followed. Vanessa leaned back slowly in her chair. You think you're innocent here? Casey said nothing. Vanessa laughed softly, but there was no humor inside it anymore. You loved acting like some martyr. Mercer immediately touched her arm. Vanessa. But she kept going. You know what your problem always was? You wanted people to need you. Casey listened quietly, not because her words hurt now, because he finally understood them. Vanessa mistook reliability for weakness, the same way she mistook silence for stupidity. Lauren interrupted calmly. This isn't marriage counseling. Vanessa looked toward her sharply. No, this is extortion. Lauren's expression never changed. No. Extortion involves threats without legal basis. We already demonstrated legal basis in open court. Mercer stepped in quickly, before Vanessa could respond again. Let's refocus. He looked toward Lauren. What exactly does your client want? That question shifted the room slightly, because Casey still hadn't spoken much since entering. Lauren turned toward him briefly. Casey answered himself this time. I want every false invoice formally acknowledged as fraudulent. Vanessa stared at him. That's it. No. Casey's voice remained steady. I want every payment documented. You'll get the money back. That's not the point. Vanessa frowned slightly. Then Casey said the thing he'd been carrying quietly for days. You made me believe someone was dying. The room went still again. Not dramatic stillness. The uncomfortable kind. Because nobody could argue with that sentence. Vanessa looked away first. Mercer cleared his throat. We can discuss wording. Lauren slid another page across the table. This includes structured repayment terms and liquidation conditions if balances are unpaid. Vanessa scanned the numbers quickly. Then her face changed. You're taking the condo. The condo was funded through fraudulent transfers, Lauren replied. It's leased. Then the lease obligations become your problem. Vanessa looked toward Casey again. You're trying to destroy my life. That almost surprised him. Not because she said it, because she genuinely seemed to believe it. Casey answered quietly. No, I stopped financing it. Mercer rubbed both temples slowly. Outside the settlement room, muffled courthouse noise drifted through the walls. Elevator bells, footsteps, lawyers speaking in low voices. Inside room 4, everything narrowed toward paper. Lauren continued reviewing terms line by line. Asset disclosures, frozen account compliance, attorney fees, structured restitution. Vanessa objected repeatedly. Too aggressive, too public, too damaging. But every time she resisted something Lauren calmly referenced, evidence already entered into court records. emails, transfers, fake invoices, recorded calls. Eventually, Mercer stopped arguing emotionally and started calculating practically. That was the moment Casey realized the case was effectively over. Not because Vanessa admitted guilt, because her attorney stopped defending innocence. An hour passed, then another. By late afternoon, rain streaked the courthouse windows, while fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Vanessa finally pushed the paperwork away in frustration. "You're enjoying this." Casey looked at her quietly. "No." "Then why do you look so calm?" He thought about that honestly. "Because for 2 years, I kept wondering whether I was doing enough to save someone. Because I blamed myself every time another invoice arrived. Because I worked myself into the ground while you laughed at me in airports." But he only said, "Because the truth already happened." Vanessa stared at him. No answer came back. Lauren checked her watch. "If we don't finalize today, Judge Pike resumes proceedings tomorrow morning." Mercer looked toward Vanessa carefully. That mattered, because tomorrow meant continued public record, more testimony, more exposure, possibly criminal referral discussions. Vanessa understood that too. Finally, she picked up the pen. Not dramatically. No breakdown. No tears. Just controlled anger tightening her jaw, while she signed, page after page. Casey watched silently. The same hand that forged invoices now signed restitution agreements. Mercer signed next. Then Lauren. When the final page slid across the table toward Casey, he looked at it for several seconds before signing his own name. Casey Price. Simple signature. Same steady handwriting he used on maintenance reports every night at the airport. When it was done, nobody spoke immediately. The air vent clicked overhead again. Vanessa stared down at the table. "You really think this changes anything?" she asked quietly. Casey stood slowly. It already did. Lauren gathered the paperwork into her binder carefully. "We'll file the agreement with the court within the hour." Mercer nodded stiffly. Vanessa remained seated while Casey walked toward the door. Then suddenly Casey. He stopped. Not because emotion pulled him back, because habit still did. He turned slightly. Vanessa looked smaller now, somehow. Not weaker, just exposed. "I did care about you once," she said. Casey studied her face for a long moment. Maybe she believed that. Maybe part of it was even true. But truth without honesty eventually rotted into something else. "I know," he answered quietly. Then he opened the door and walked out. Marcus stood immediately from the hallway bench. "Well?" Casey looked exhausted. Suddenly, "It's done." Marcus grinned. "That's it? That's all you got?" Casey almost smiled. Almost. Then his phone buzzed inside his pocket. Airport dispatch. He answered automatically. "Price." Static crackled briefly over the line. Then major refrigeration failure near Concourse C food storage. "We need you back here, ASAP." Casey closed his eyes for half a second. Marcus laughed loudly. "Man just won a fraud case and still getting called into work." Casey slid the phone back into his pocket. For the first time in weeks, the weight in his chest felt lighter. Not gone, just lighter. And strangely enough, hearing another maintenance emergency waiting at the airport sounded comforting. Machines still made sense. 3 weeks after the settlement agreement, Casey Price was back beneath Concourse C, replacing a failed compressor motor at 3 in the morning. Like nothing had happened. Cold air pushed through the maintenance corridor, while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere above him, red-eye passengers dragged carry-on bags toward overnight connections. The airport moved endlessly, indifferent to lawsuits and betrayals and court orders. Casey preferred that. Machines didn't care about your personal history. A wrench slipped against steel bolts with a sharp metallic click. Casey adjusted the socket angle and tried again. Careful old man Marcus Bennett called from behind him. "Your reflexes ain't what they used to be." Casey didn't look up. "You standing there talking counts as helping." Now Marcus grinned and handed him another flashlight. The refrigeration repair had already stretched past 2 hours. One cooling unit failure triggered another shutdown inside the airport's food storage system. And now half the overnight kitchen inventory risked spoiling if temperatures climbed any higher. Normally, Casey would have hated the overtime. Now it felt strangely calming. Work had rhythm again, simple problems, clear solutions, nothing hidden behind fake hospital invoices. Marcus leaned against the wall, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "You know everybody's talking about you now." Casey tightened the final bolt. "That sounds terrible." "It kinda is." Marcus laughed. "Whole maintenance department thinks you secretly some genius revenge mastermind." Casey slid the compressor panel back into place. "I filed paperwork. That's not exactly Batman stuff. Man, you took down a scam operation with spreadsheets and patience." Casey stood slowly, wiping grease from his hands. That was Lauren. Marcus pointed at him. No. Most people would have exploded at gate B12. Casey remembered that morning clearly. The first-class boarding passes, Diane laughing, Vanessa smiling beside luxury luggage. For a second, he could still feel the cold air leaking from the damaged vent against his skin. Marcus continued, "You know what saved you? What you stayed quiet, long enough to learn everything." Casey didn't answer. Because Marcus was right. Silence protected him long before it protected the case. At 4:18 a.m., the cooling system finally restarted successfully. Air pressure stabilized across the storage network while compressors hummed steadily again. Casey packed his tools carefully into the worn metal case he'd carried for years. Same toolbox, same uniform, same old Ford parked outside. But something fundamental had shifted anyway. The settlement payments had already begun processing. Lauren kept him updated weekly. Blue Cedar Consulting dissolved officially within 9 days of the court order. The Miami condo lease terminated early after missed obligations. Several luxury accounts vanished almost immediately once the frozen assets hit. Vanessa's world collapsed faster than Casey expected. Not because she lost everything, because so much of it never truly belonged to her. Around sunrise, Casey stopped at a Waffle House near Murfreesboro Pike after clocking out. Same booth he always used. Same exhausted truck drivers drinking coffee before dawn. The waitress named Rhonda looked up from behind the counter. "Haven't seen you smiling in a while," she said casually. Casey almost checked his reflection instinctively. He didn't realize he was. "Must be the hash browns," he answered. Rhonda snorted. "Sure." He ate slowly, while morning traffic brightened outside the windows. For 2 years, every spare dollar carried invisible weight. Now, for the first time in a long time, Casey ordered breakfast without mentally calculating upcoming medical transfers. That realization hit him harder than the courtroom victory did. Freedom sometimes arrived quietly. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the absence of constant pressure. Later that afternoon, Lauren called while Casey changed oil in his truck driveway. "You busy?" she asked. "Not really." "You received the first repayment transfer this morning." Casey wiped his hands with a rag. "I saw." "How do you feel?" The question surprised him. Nobody asked that much anymore. Casey looked toward the old Ford, sitting half-lifted on the jack stand. Oil stains marked the driveway beneath it. For years, he kept repairing this truck instead of replacing it. Not because he loved it, because somebody else's lies consumed every extra dollar. Tired mostly, he admitted. Lauren laughed, softly. "That's probably normal." A brief silence followed. Then she added, "There's something else." Casey waited. "I spoke with a contact at Vanderbilt." His expression sharpened slightly. "What about?" Lauren's voice stayed calm. They reviewed the case informally after the hearing record circulated. Casey leaned against the truck. "And they want to know whether you'd consider helping fund a small patient assistance program anonymously." That caught him completely off guard. "For real patients, yes." The irony almost felt unreal. Casey stared down in the wrench in his hand. 2 years paying fake medical bills. Now a real hospital asking if he wanted to help actual patients. Lauren continued carefully. "No pressure. I just thought you should know." Casey looked toward the quiet street outside his house. Kids rode bicycles near the corner mailbox while somebody mowed grass farther down the block. Ordinary life. Steady. He thought about people sitting in real oncology, waiting rooms right now. Scared families. Actual treatment. Real fear. Not performance. "How much would it take to start something small?" he asked quietly. Lauren smiled through the phone. "I had a feeling you'd ask that." 3 months later, nobody at the airport knew Casey had done it. That's exactly how he wanted things. The Vanderbilt Patient Relief Fund appeared quietly online beneath a list of donor-supported assistance programs. Anonymous contributor. Emergency transportation and temporary lodging support for low-income cancer patients. No plaque, no speech, no public recognition. Marcus only found out accidentally after Lauren mentioned it during a paperwork call. "You serious?" Marcus asked. One night during break. Casey shrugged. Money should probably help actual sick people this time. Marcus stared at him for several seconds. "You know, most people would have bought a Corvette after all that." Casey looked out through the break room window toward planes taxiing across the wet runway. "I still got the truck." "Yeah, because you're weird." Casey almost smiled again. Almost. Months passed quietly after that. No dramatic updates from Vanessa. No emotional closure scenes. Lauren informed him that several investigative agencies still reviewed the financial fraud documentation. But Casey stopped asking for details eventually. He didn't need more punishment. He needed peace. One cold February morning, Casey walked through Concourse B, carrying a maintenance clipboard when he passed Gate B12 again. Same gate, same polished floors, same overhead announcements echoing across the terminal. He slowed slightly without meaning to. The memory returned instantly. Vanessa's coat, Diane laughing, the first-class boarding tags. For a second, he simply stood there, watching passengers line up beneath the gate monitor. Then an elderly woman near the seating area accidentally dropped a folder of travel papers across the floor. People walked around her without stopping. Casey immediately crouched down to help gather everything. Boarding passes, medication forms, reading glasses. The woman looked embarrassed. "Oh, Lord, thank you." Casey handed the papers back carefully. "No problem." She smiled weakly. My husband's waiting for surgery in Denver." Casey paused, briefly. Real fear this time. Real exhaustion in her eyes. Not manipulation. He helped zip the folder closed. "You'll make the flight," he said quietly. The woman squeezed his hand once. Then she disappeared into the boarding line. Casey watched her go for a moment before continuing down the concourse. The airport speakers echoed overhead, while another plane prepared for departure outside the windows. And for the first time since the divorce, Gate B12 no longer felt like the place his life collapsed. Just another gate. 6 months after the courthouse settlement, Casey Price finally used one of his vacation days. Not because he was sick, not because another crisis forced him to, because he wanted to leave. That alone felt unfamiliar. At 5:10 a.m., Casey parked his old Ford F-150 inside the employee lot at Nashville International Airport and sat quietly behind the steering wheel for a moment before turning the engine off. Cold March rain tapped softly against the windshield. Inside the truck rested a single carry-on bag and a boarding pass to Seattle. His younger sister, Emily, had been asking him to visit for almost 4 years. He always postponed. Too much work, too many bills, not enough money. Now the excuses were gone. Casey grabbed the bag and stepped into the rain. The airport looked different when he wasn't wearing a maintenance uniform. No steel-toe boots, no grease stains, no tool belt hanging from his hip. Just dark jeans, a plain jacket, and a man moving through the terminal like everyone else for once. A few TSA employees recognized him immediately. Price, one agent laughed. "You finally escaping this place." "Trying to... You look weird without a wrench." Casey almost smiled. "That's what Marcus says." The terminal buzzed with early morning movement around him. Coffee machines hissed. Rolling luggage rattled across tile floors. Flight announcements echoed overhead, beneath bright fluorescent lighting. For years, this airport had been his entire world. He knew every maintenance tunnel, every failing vent, every hidden service corridor behind the terminals. But now, he walked through it differently, lighter, not happy exactly, peaceful, and peace felt quieter than he expected. His phone buzzed while he waited near security. Lauren Whitmore. Casey answered immediately. "Morning. You at the airport already?" "Yeah, Seattle today, right? Hopefully. Lauren laughed softly. You sound nervous. Casey adjusted the strap on his carry-on. I haven't taken a real trip in years. That's usually what vacations are. A brief silence followed. Then her voice became more professional again. One update before you disappear into the Pacific Northwest. Casey leaned lightly against the wall near the security line. What happened? The restitution process is officially complete. He absorbed that quietly. Every payment returned. Every documented transfer accounted for. No missing balances left hanging in legal paperwork anymore. And Lauren continued, state investigators are still reviewing related fraud documentation. Mercer believes Vanessa may attempt a negotiated resolution separately. Casey looked out through the terminal windows toward rain-covered runways. What does that mean? Probably fines. Possibly charges. Depends how aggressively they pursue it. Casey nodded once. He realized something strange then. He didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. 6 months earlier, he probably would have. Now, he mostly felt distant from the entire situation. Lauren seemed to understand. You okay? Yeah, you don't sound interested. Casey watched a Southwest plane push back slowly from the gate. I think I stopped on needing punishment after the truth came out. Lauren stayed quiet for a second. Then, that's healthier than most people manage. Casey thanked her for everything before ending the call. The security line moved slowly forward. Families, business travelers, college students half asleep holding coffee cups. Ordinary people carrying ordinary problems. No one around him knew he once financed a fake cancer scam for 2 years. And Casey realized he preferred it that way. A man in front of him struggled folding a stroller while holding a crying toddler. Casey stepped forward automatically and helped lock one side into place. Thanks, the exhausted father muttered. No problem. Small things, simple things. Life felt made of those again, instead of court filings and evidence binders. Near Gate B12, Casey stopped walking unintentionally. His feet simply slowed. The gate looked almost identical to the morning everything changed. Same polished floor reflections, same rows of charging stations, same airport announcements drifting through the concourse. Different people now, different flights, different life. Casey stood there quietly holding his boarding pass while passengers lined up nearby for Denver. 6 months earlier, this place felt poisoned. Now, it just felt ordinary. That surprised him most. Pain always felt permanent while you were inside it. Then one day, it became a location instead of a wound. His phone buzzed again. Marcos Bennett. Casey answered immediately. You miss me already. Marcus snorted loudly through the speaker. Hell no. Break room fridge died again. Casey laughed quietly. Actual laughter this time. Not forced. Marcus heard it immediately. Well, damn, Marcus said. That's the first real laugh I heard out of you in like 3 years. Casey sat down near the gate windows. Outside, rain streaked across the glass, while baggage crews loaded cargo into a waiting aircraft. "What's happening at the airport?" he asked. "Same chaos. One TSA guy threw up in your Terminal C, Starbucks. Some tourist clogged a toilet with paper towels. Couple compressors acting stupid." Casey shook his head, smiling faintly. "Sounds normal." Marcus became quieter. After a moment, "You deserve this trip, man." Casey looked down at the boarding pass in his hand. "Seattle. Departure 7:42 a.m. For years, he kept postponing his own life while trying to rescue someone else's lie. Marcus continued speaking. "You know what's funny? What you never changed after all that." Casey frowned slightly. "I did." "Nah," Marcus replied. "You just stopped letting bad people use the good parts." That sentence stayed with Casey after the call ended. Because maybe that was true. The betrayal didn't turn him cruel, didn't make him bitter. It just forced him to finally separate kindness from blindness. Boarding began 10 minutes later. Passengers stood gradually, forming loose lines beneath the overhead monitor. Casey rose with them. As he walked toward the boarding scanner, an elderly woman near the seats accidentally dropped a small envelope beside her purse. Casey bent automatically and picked it up. Medical paperwork. Travel assistance documents from Vanderbilt Oncology. Real ones. The woman smiled weakly. "Thank you, honey." Casey handed the envelope back carefully. "No problem." Then he noticed that the assistance program name printed near the bottom. The same anonymous patient fund Lauren helped him establish months earlier. The woman probably had no idea where the money came from. That felt right, too. Casey nodded politely and stepped into the boarding line. Outside the windows, dawn slowly broke over Nashville. Soft gray light across wet runways. Aircraft lights blinking through the rain. The boarding scanner beeped as the airline employee checked his pass. "Have a good flight, Mr. Price." Casey adjusted the strap on his carry-on and stepped on to the jet bridge. No more invoices waiting at home. No more lies disguised as emergencies. No more promises chained to manipulation. Just movement. Forward. And for the first time in years, Casey Price boarded a plane carrying only his own life. The hardest part about betrayal is not losing money. It's realizing trust was turned into a tool against you. Casey kept paying those bills because he believed loyalty still meant something after divorce. That didn't make him weak. It made him honest in a world where honesty is often mistaken for blindness. But the moment he stopped reacting emotionally and started paying attention, the entire lie collapsed under its own weight. A lot of people watching this have probably experienced something similar. Maybe not fake medical bills, maybe not courtrooms, but many people know what it feels like to give too much to the wrong person because they wanted to believe the best in them. The lesson isn't to become cold. It's to understand that kindness still needs boundaries, and trust should never replace evidence. If you were in Casey's position, what would have hurt you more? Losing the money or hearing the people you trusted laugh about it behind your back? Share your answer in the comments. I read them all. And if you enjoy stories about quiet strength, betrayal, patience, and people who fight back without losing themselves, subscribe now. Tomorrow's story begins with a man who received a thank you card from the company that secretly destroyed his career.